Imagine this. You wake up every morning before the sun comes up. You sit in traffic, spend hours at work, deal with stress, deadlines, difficult coworkers, and the constant pressure of trying to get ahead. For years, you do everything people tell you to do. You work hard. You save money. You avoid unnecessary spending. You invest consistently. While everyone else seems focused on enjoying today, you're thinking about tomorrow. And eventually, something incredible happens. Your bank account starts growing. Your investments begin compounding. For the first time in your life, you feel like you're making real financial progress. Maybe you reach your first $10,000, then $50,000, then $100,000, and suddenly you start looking at money differently. But here's the strange part. The moment people realize you're doing well financially, everything changes. Friends start asking for favors. Family members assume you can help. Coworkers make comments about your lifestyle. People begin treating you differently, not because you've changed, but because their perception of you has changed. And without realizing it, you begin spending more, explaining more, and feeling pressure you never felt before. Here's the thing. Most people think getting rich is about making more money. But the truth is, making money is only half the battle. Keeping it, growing it, and protecting it from social pressure is the part nobody talks about. And that's exactly why one of the most powerful wealth-building habits is surprisingly simple. When you get rich, tell no one. My name is Demas, and I spend way too much time thinking about money. If you're someone who feels stuck financially, make sure to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Look, most people think money is simply a numbers game. Earn more, save more, invest more, and eventually you'll become wealthy. Sounds simple, right? But if building wealth were only about math, far more people would be financially successful today. The reality is very different. Some people earn six figures and still live paycheck to paycheck. Others earn average incomes and quietly build substantial wealth over time. So what's the difference? Here's what most people don't realize. Money is rarely the problem. Behavior is. The way we think about money, the way we react to social pressure, and the way we compare ourselves to others often determines our financial future more than our income ever will. That's why two people with identical salaries can end up in completely different financial situations 20 years later. One builds financial freedom. The other builds financial stress. And the reason usually has very little to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with psychology. Because money isn't just math. Money is emotion. Money is identity. Money is status. And once you understand how those forces influence your decisions, you'll begin to see why some people quietly become wealthy while others spend their entire lives trying to look wealthy. And trust me, those are two very different things. Most people hear the exact same financial advice throughout their lives. Work hard, earn more money, spend less than you make, invest consistently, avoid bad debt, and eventually you'll become wealthy. Now, don't get me wrong. That's solid advice. In fact, if more people followed those basic principles, the average financial situation would probably improve dramatically. But here's the thing. That advice only explains what to do. It doesn't explain why so many people fail to do it. Because if financial success were simply about knowledge, almost everyone with internet access would be wealthy by now. The information is everywhere. Books, podcasts, YouTube channels, financial blogs. The problem isn't a lack of information. The problem is behavior. Here's what most people don't realize. The biggest threat to your financial future usually isn't a stock market crash. It's not inflation. It's not even a recession. Often it's the pressure that comes from the people around you. Think about what happens when your income starts increasing. You get a raise, you land a better job. Maybe your business begins growing. Suddenly, expectations start changing. Your friends suggest more expensive restaurants. Coworkers assume you can afford nicer things. Family members may begin viewing you differently. And before you know it, your lifestyle starts growing just as fast as your income. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it's one of the biggest wealth killers in the world. Look, making more money doesn't automatically make you wealthy. Keeping more of what you earn does. And that's where the real challenge begins. Because building wealth isn't just a financial battle. It's a social battle, a psychological battle. And most people never realize they're fighting it until years of potential wealth have already disappeared. Let's look at a simple example. Imagine two people, Sarah and Mike. Both are 30 years old. Both earn $80,000 a year. Both receive similar raises throughout their careers. And both have access to the exact same investment opportunities. On paper, their financial future should look almost identical. But it doesn't. Sarah decides to invest $1,000 every month into a diversified index fund, earning an average annual return of 8%. She doesn't live extravagantly. She doesn't constantly upgrade her lifestyle every time her income increases. Instead, she quietly directs most of her extra income toward building assets. Now let's look at Mike. Every time he gets a raise, he rewards himself. A newer car, a larger apartment, luxury vacations, designer clothes. Nothing extreme, just small lifestyle upgrades that seem harmless in the moment. As a result, Mike only invests $400 per month. Now here's where it gets really interesting. After 20 years, Sarah's portfolio grows to roughly $590,000. Mike's portfolio reaches only about $236,000. That's a difference of more than $350,000. And remember, they earned the same income. They had the same opportunities. The difference wasn't intelligence. The difference wasn't luck. The difference was behavior. Look, most people think wealth is built through massive financial decisions, but wealth is usually built through hundreds of small choices repeated over decades. Every unnecessary lifestyle upgrade has a hidden cost, not just the money spent today, but the future growth that money could have generated. That's the power of compound interest. And it's also why trying to look rich often becomes one of the most expensive financial mistakes a person can make. Because appearances don't compound, investments do. Now let's talk about something that rarely gets discussed in traditional financial advice: psychology. Because this is where money stops being a math problem and starts becoming a human problem. Look, most people know what they should do with their money. They know they should save more. They know they should invest consistently. They know they shouldn't overspend. Yet millions of people struggle to follow those simple rules. Why? Because human beings are emotional creatures. One of the strongest forces influencing our financial decisions is something psychologists call instant gratification. We naturally prefer rewards today over rewards in the future. A new car today feels exciting. A larger investment portfolio 20 years from now feels distant and abstract. So our brains often choose the immediate reward, even when it's financially irrational. But that's only part of the story. There's another psychological force that's even more powerful. It's called loss aversion. Here's what most people don't realize. People hate losing something far more than they enjoy gaining something, and that includes social status. Imagine you finally achieve financial success. People begin seeing you as successful. Now you feel pressure to maintain that image. Maybe you upgrade your lifestyle. Maybe you buy things you don't really need. Maybe you spend money simply to avoid looking like you're moving backward. This is where it gets really interesting. At that point, your financial decisions are no longer based on logic. They're based on emotion, and emotions are expensive. Because every dollar spent trying to impress people is a dollar that can no longer compound for your future. The wealthy understand this. They don't eliminate emotions. They simply stop letting emotions control their money. And that small shift in mindset often creates a massive difference in long-term wealth. Have you ever met someone who looked incredibly wealthy? They drive a luxury car, wear designer clothes, take expensive vacations, post pictures from fancy restaurants every weekend. From the outside, it seems obvious that they're rich. But here's the thing. Appearances can be incredibly misleading. In many cases, what people call wealth is actually spending. And spending is not the same thing as wealth. Real wealth is often invisible. You can't always see someone's investment portfolio. You can't see their retirement accounts. You can't see the rental properties they own. You can't see the years of disciplined financial decisions happening behind the scenes. Look, the internet has trained us to associate wealth with visible consumption. Private jets, luxury watches, exotic cars, massive homes. But many genuinely wealthy people live surprisingly ordinary lives. They drive practical vehicles. They avoid unnecessary upgrades. They don't feel the need to constantly prove their success. Why? Because they understand something most people never learn. Wealth is not what you buy. Wealth is what you keep. Think about it like this. Imagine two people. One spends $100,000 trying to look rich. The other invests $100,000 into assets that continue growing for decades. One receives attention. The other receives freedom. And freedom is ultimately what money is supposed to provide. The freedom to retire early. The freedom to walk away from a toxic job. The freedom to spend time with family. The freedom to make choices without financial fear. This is where it gets really interesting. The wealthiest people are often focused on increasing options, not increasing appearances. Because attention fades quickly, status constantly changes, but ownership creates lasting security. And that's why real wealth is usually much quieter than people expect. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need applause. And it certainly doesn't need an audience. Now, you might be thinking, what's actually wrong with telling people I'm doing well financially? And honestly, that's a fair question. After all, you've worked hard for your success. You've sacrificed. You've stayed disciplined. So why shouldn't you enjoy it? The problem isn't sharing your success. The problem is what often happens afterward. Here's what most people don't realize. The moment other people know you have money, they begin creating expectations around that money. Not necessarily because they're selfish. Not because they're bad people. It's simply human nature. Imagine you receive a large promotion at work. Your income jumps significantly. At first, everyone is happy for you. But over time, subtle changes begin to appear. Friends assume expensive dinners won't be a problem. Family members may start expecting financial help. Coworkers begin comparing their situation to yours. Some people become inspired. Others become resentful. And some quietly begin judging your financial decisions. This is where it gets really interesting. The cost isn't always financial. Often it's psychological. Because now you're no longer managing your money alone. You're managing other people's expectations. And expectations can be incredibly expensive. You start feeling guilty for saying no. You feel pressure to maintain a certain lifestyle. You begin explaining purchases you never needed to justify before. And suddenly your financial success comes with emotional baggage. Look, wealth is supposed to create freedom. But when too many people become invested in your finances, that freedom starts shrinking. That's why many wealthy individuals choose privacy. Not because they're hiding, not because they're antisocial, but because they've learned that protecting their peace is often just as important as protecting their money. And sometimes, the less people know about your finances, the easier it becomes to make smart financial decisions for your future. So what do people who successfully build wealth over decades actually do differently? The answer might surprise you, because it's usually not some secret investment strategy. It's not a hidden stock tip, and it's definitely not a magic formula. In fact, most wealthy people follow a surprisingly boring approach. They focus on consistency instead of excitement. Look, the average person often thinks about money in terms of spending. What can I buy with this raise? What car can I afford? What lifestyle matches my income? But wealthy people tend to think differently. They ask questions like, how can I invest this? How can I make this money work for me? How can I turn today's income into tomorrow's freedom? That's a completely different mindset. Here's what most people don't realize. Every time your income increases, you face a choice. You can upgrade your lifestyle, or you can upgrade your future. The wealthy often choose the second option. Instead of dramatically increasing spending, they increase ownership. They buy assets. They invest more. They automate savings. They let compound interest do the heavy lifting. And perhaps most importantly, they become comfortable looking average. Now that sounds simple, but it's incredibly difficult in a world obsessed with appearances. This is where it gets really interesting. Many people stay financially stuck because they need external validation. They want others to see their success. The wealthy often don't. They're willing to drive the older car. They're willing to skip unnecessary upgrades. They're willing to live below their means even when they don't have to, because they understand a simple truth. Attention is temporary. Financial freedom is permanent. And over time, that mindset creates a gap so large that two people with similar incomes can end up living completely different lives. Not because one earned more, but because one thought differently about money. So what's the real lesson here? It's actually much simpler than most people think. The goal of money was never to impress people. The goal was freedom. Somewhere along the way, many people forgot that. They started measuring success by visible things. The car they drive, the house they live in, the clothes they wear, the vacations they post online. But look, none of those things guarantee financial security. None of those things guarantee peace of mind. And none of those things guarantee freedom. Here's the thing. There are people earning six figures who constantly worry about money. And there are people with far lower incomes who sleep peacefully because they've built strong financial foundations. The difference isn't always income. It's often behavior. It's discipline. It's patience. And it's understanding that wealth is what you keep, not what you display. Now, you might be thinking, so should I never enjoy my success? Of course not. Celebrate your wins. Take the vacation. Buy things that genuinely improve your life. Enjoy the rewards of your hard work. But don't confuse enjoyment with performance. Don't spend money simply because you want other people to see it. Because the moment your financial decisions become dependent on outside approval, you're giving away part of your freedom. And freedom is the most valuable thing money can buy. This is where it gets really interesting. The people who quietly build wealth often end up with the greatest lives. Not because they have the nicest things, but because they have the most options. They can leave bad jobs. They can handle emergencies. They can spend time with family. They can make decisions without constant financial stress. That's real wealth. So if your income increases, if your investments grow, if your net worth reaches milestones you've dreamed about for years, be proud of yourself. You've earned it. But remember this. The goal was never to look rich. The goal was always to become financially free. And freedom doesn't need an audience. When you get rich, tell no one.